Today's event is an initiative that I started, and it's aimed to help all the first and second year students and some third year students here to develop an interest in specific areas before they get into the workforce. What I tend to find when I talk to recent graduates or interns is that they work in that specific area simply because the firm that they apply to put them in that area, if it's a consulting firm, or if it's corporate, simply because a company is in general insurance, for example. So hopefully this event tonight will help you develop specific interests or get you started with whichever 6 areas that you might be interested in at the moment.
I will probably start by telling you what a fascinating job you can have if you work in banking, and that's where most of my career has been spent. But it all started quite randomly. So probably like a lot of you, in high school I loved maths. I enjoyed other things, and some other things I was reasonably good at, but I absolutely loved maths. So I knew it was going to be maths. One thing that I've only realised in the last 6 to 12 months is no one in my family or extended family ever worked in an office. So when the maths master at my school said, and I grew up in country New South Wales, when he suggested, because he had a son who was an actuary, the only other actuary that ever came from where I grew up, suggested I might like to be an actuary, first thing my father said was, oh my goodness, you have to work in an office, and it's only really cold, horrible people that work in offices. So, and you're not like that, so you can't work in an office. So I put that to one side and then went off and did a science degree, majoring in pure maths, 4 years of pure maths and a lot of physics and applied maths and math stats along with that. Then I came to the end of my 4 years and obviously had to, one, get a job, but I still wanted to study further. And then that's when I saw, at that stage there were lots and lots of demand for people who were mathematical. So I applied to a few different organisations for different jobs, but as a sign of my naivety, I only applied to one company to be an actuarial student, which was the biggest company at the time, which was AMP. And lucky for me, they actually gave me the job. And I told people, you may have heard this before, but they never interviewed me, which would never happen today. I sent in a letter and a CV, or I guess I put an academic record, and they sent me a letter saying you've been offered the job. And I rang them up because I couldn't believe it. I rang them up and said, are you sure I've got this job? And they go, yes. And I said, so you don't even want to see me? And they said, no. And I said, you don't even see what I want to look like? And they said, is there something wrong with how you look? Is this true? And I said, well, I don't think so. And they said, no, just turn up. Which sort of says a lot about the way the actuarial profession was viewed at that time, is you were just kind of a nerdy person that got stuck in a back room and you didn't have to worry about things. Fortunately, I ended up in the very famous Branch Actuaries, and I got to work on defined benefit super funds, which I loved because it had to me like a social purpose. There was an ultimate end that people would be compensated, whether it was through disability, through death. There was a social purpose for that. And then I did move to another area. I was promoted to another area of AMP, but it was not super, which made me realise how much I really did like super. And then I went and worked for Mercantile Mutual, which is now ING, because it was one of the biggest companies in super at the time. And then from there, I was there for 6 years, and I loved every second of that. And then, and it's a good thing about reading actuarial newsletters, there was an ad there to say that Citibank put an ad in to say that they wanted trainee derivatives traders with actuarial backgrounds. And I didn't know what a derivative was, really, and I certainly didn't understand what one was. And I thought, and so I went for the interview. I didn't want the job, but I thought I wanted to work for a bank that would round it out. And it was funny because if any of you know or have heard of Mike Hawker, you're all probably too young. He was then playing rugby for Australia, and he was also head of the dealing room in Citibank. And I'm not a rugby person at all, and so I'd never heard of Mike Hawker. And he interviewed me, and he asked me a whole lot of questions about not about maths or actuarial studies, but asked me a whole lot of questions about my approach to working in a team environment. What were my relationship skills like? And it was very clear, I don't want this job. And he said, because it was in a dealing room, it was 80 guys, 2 females at that time. And I was used to this hallowed world of having my own office and my own secretary, and I was only in my 20s. And there was this dealing room that was chaotic and horrible. And I said, look, I don't want this job. And he said, why? And I said, well, it's full of blokes. And he said, what's wrong with that? And I said, well, they probably drink too much, they probably swear a lot, they probably all drive Ferraris, they probably have no morals or ethics, they probably do all these, pick up women all the time, and I'm just not like that. And he goes, I think you should take the job. So I went and asked a friend of mine who's quite a famous actuary and who's a year older than me, and I said, I've been offered this job. And the letter, the letter of offer said, and I still have kept that letter, it said, Jan will be the 3rd man in a 3-man team and she will sit on the desk. And that was all the lingo. It was full of lingo. And I thought, I'm not a 3rd man in some team and I'm not going to sit on any desk. And so the bottom line was, I said to this friend, what about this? But they were very keen for me to join. And he said, why don't you want to take the job? And I said, all those moral reasons, but more importantly, I think I'll be terrible at this job, because it's a difference between long-term problems with long-term solutions and getting them right, and a very short-term pricing something, a whole different ball game. And he said, well, what would you do if you were terrible? And I said, I'd do it for 6 months and then I'd resign if I hated it, and then I'd probably travel around the world for a year. I'd sit on a mountain somewhere, I'd rethink my life, and I might go and do something else. And he said, well, there's probably no downside. So I took the job. And I got sworn at, I got things thrown at me, I got yelled at, I got told people they didn't give me enough personal space. But I learnt a huge amount. And I was talking earlier to one of the other speakers, when I worked in my other jobs, there were doers, checkers, looker-overs, everyone was checking everything you did and every answer had to be perfect. And suddenly within the first week or 2, I was doing these derivative quotes on $50 million deals. And no one checked anything that I did. And so I said to my boss, that was very uncomfortable. I said, what is going to happen if I get something wrong? I said, does anyone want to check this? And they go, no, it's fine. Just tell us the number, just tell us the answer, we'll use it in a trade. And I go, well, what happens if I get it wrong, if I stuff up? And they go, it's fine, you'll just get fired. And which was just very, very confronting for me. The bottom line was I worked in derivatives and capital markets in a dealing room for 9 years, and I got the opportunity to work in London and in New York, and then I decided that I was engaged, I wanted to have a family, and getting the 1 a.m, 2 a.m, 3 a.m. phone calls were not conducive to having a family. So I decided that I would continue my banking career, and I ended up going and working for Westpac in the institutional bank, and eventually had a team of 300 people globally who were all basically investment bankers and research analysts. And so we looked after any company globally that was consumer, industrial, property, energy and resources with a market cap of over 500 million anywhere in the world that we dealt with. So whether that was Boeing or Qantas or Sara Lee or Pioneer or Airbus or LVMH or Woolworths or things like that. So that was really interesting. It was really, really interesting. And the last, and I loved that. And I think I guess there's very few bits of advice I would be brave enough to give. I think one of them is to work out a bit about who you are. And I worked out pretty quickly that I loved the client side. I am not a backroom person, so I really loved being part of a team. I loved leading teams, and I loved the negotiation. I loved all of that piece, and I loved a lot of the things being part of an M&A type of world as well. But I still had my great passion for super. So when Westpac bought BT, they also bought a massive superannuation business and wealth business. And the last 4 years of the time that I was with Westpac, I was asked to go over to BT and run their private bank, which was all part of their wealth business. So that was how I finished my executive career, and in the last few years I have been a non-executive director. So I sit on the 2 Mercer boards, one of the Suncorp boards, Australian Philanthropic Services, which is about public and private ancillary funds, and one of my other great interests is athletics. I'm on the board of Athletics Australia. So my bits of advice, in terms of banking, there is everything from, I guess I was more at one extreme, which was the front office, dealing with clients, having a big team, having all that area, right through to, the risk side, risk assessment, and, risk used to be the bad word, the dirty word, and no one wanted to do those jobs. Now they are just so incredibly sought after, people with good risk frameworks. And of course, there's a lot of actuaries and quant people that are used in dealing rooms and in trading rooms as well. So there's a vast array of jobs on offer in that area. So I think it's just, you kind of work out a bit of what you like, a bit of what you don't like, and start building on that. Thank you.